Hey guys, it's Godbars here, the self-proclaimed hip-hop historian, and this is the 313th episode of my series, where I grab a vinyl from my collection, talk about why I love it, what influence it has, and what its place is in the grand scheme of hip-hop. So it's been a good 200 plus episodes since I last covered the legendary Missy Elliot, which was when I tackled her forward-thinking, highly unique 1997 debut, Supa Dupa Fly. But as I'm sure I mentioned in that review, which I'll leave a link for down below in the description if you want to check it out, Missy wasn't one of those artists who just put out a classic album and then either disappeared off the scene, or just never managed to create anything that lived up to the hype of her first project. In fact, she really couldn't fit into that category less, because you can hardly go wrong with any of the first 4 albums in Missy's brief yet prolific discography, to the point I sometimes waver back and forth on what my personal favorite is, as I'm positive I named her game-changing breakout album as my favorite when I reviewed it, but while I still absolutely adore that thing, there are definitely some days where I find myself more drawn to her third studio full-length here, which is 2001's Missy So Addictive. That isn't to say you should negate the rest of her output though, because her 1999 sophomore LP, The Real World, is another killer project I'd love to get on vinyl. And you can't forget 2002's Under Construction, which not only includes Work It, one of the biggest hits this icon has to her name, but it's also a pretty clean and concise release that I've actually seen a number of Missy fans and publications name as her best album, and while her last 2 projects don't normally get quite as much attention, there's still a commendable amount of highlights when it comes to 2003's This Is Not a Test, as well as her 6th and final album, 2005's The Cookbook. What makes today's pick such a strong point for me is how Missy really delivers a top-tier mix of extremely fun party bops that are guaranteed to get your body moving, and more slow R&B ballads. And there's very few, if any, rappers, male or female, who have managed to consistently excel and deliver in both of those categories the way Missy has. I think this LP really exemplified how ahead of her time Missy Elliot was upon her debut a few years prior, because with almost any other rapper who debuted or got popular around 96 or 97, they were having to sort of look for ways to reinvent themselves in an effort to keep up with the rapidly changing pace of hip-hop in the early 2000s. Meanwhile, Missy is obviously showing clear growth like any artist on their third studio full-length, but she really didn't have to alter or update her style and musical MO in the slightest. If anything, it was more like the rest of the world was finally beginning to catch up to where her and Timbaland had already been nearly 5 years earlier. Speaking of whom, Timbo as usual is at the helm with the production here, and this was definitely during the golden era of his career in my opinion, where he was just constantly cranking out some of his most iconic instrumentals ever, and further defining himself in the industry with his unmistakable trademark bouncy sound. And it was around this time that he would begin pulling more sample material from foreign influences like India, which helped separate Timbaland even further from his contemporaries, and made it so it was all but perfectly apparent when a song came on the radio and Timbaland was the one behind it. I'm definitely not the biggest fan of some of the weird and kind of gross AI experiments with voices of dead legends that he's been a bit too excited to be at the forefront of, because personally I find it pretty morally questionable to use the voice of someone who's passed away and can't consent, and releasing verses full of things they never said that obviously they can't sign off on. However, while looking back at his actual production discography and overall musical legacy, I try to push those discrepancies to the back of my mind and just focus on the output itself, because after all, there is a good reason that Timbo is so often named as one of the top 5 producers alive. And there's without a doubt countless listeners out there who would maintain he deserves his spot in that conversation. I'm not too sure if Timbo would be in my top 5 or anything, but some of his work on Missy So Addictive here goes so far above and beyond what other projects of this time were attempting sonically, that it makes it pretty much impossible to feel any type of way when you see him up there on someone's producer Mount Rushmore. In fact, my personal favorite beat that the dude ever put together shows up on this thing, which comes through the absolutely gorgeous flip he lays down for the more R&B flavored song Takeaway, where Missy Elliot and Genuine delivered these rich, passionate performances that culminate in a total earworm of a hook. And those alone would have been enough to make this a standout moment, but with the added bonus of being backed by this enveloping, beautifully kind of stuttered instrumental, it jumps up to becoming honestly a contender for my favorite song Missy has to her name. While every single track here was partially or fully produced by Timbo himself, there was a small handful of affiliates who helped out with co-production, on certain tracks at least, including Craig Brockman, Nyson, D-Man, Big Tank, and Missy herself. As for guest appearances on this thing, I did mention legendary R&B singer Genuine already, but he's in good company as we also get features from the likes of Charlene, Tweet Keys, Timbaland, Jade, Lil Mo, Method Man and Redman, Ludacris, Eve, Busta Rhymes, Da Brat, and Jay-Z. For my honorable mentions on this one, I definitely want to shout out some killer tracks including Lick Shots, Scream aka Itchin', Old School Joint, For My People, Bus a Bus, What Ya Gonna Do, 1 Minute Man, and Slap Slap Slap. When it comes down to the overall top 3, I think I would have to name my favorite moments as Takeaway, Get Your Freak On, and Dog and Heat. Thank you for watching my 313th video. Next time we have an artist who actually featured on the LP I just discussed, and they're definitely a bit overdue for a spot on the page. So look for that one, and if you enjoyed, be sure to like, subscribe, and let me know what track spoke to you the most off this hip-hop R&B hybrid. Don't forget to have a great day, and I'll see you next time, okay? Alright.